The Bishnoi gang, a violent criminal terror outfit linked to India as a terrorist group. Now, this action is being touted as a tough stance on terrorism. Intel sources argue that it exposes a deeply selective approach by Ottawa, which continues to offer safe haven to Khalistani separatist groups known for their violent and anti-India activities, despite India's repeated submissions of detailed dossiers highlighting the terror networks, funding channels and propaganda operations of Khalistani extremists operating from Canadian soil. Canada has largely ignored these calls for decisive action against the Khalistanis. Intel sources have now revealed that Ottawa must extradite extremisms, not just play optics. Intel sources have also revealed that Canada is diluting India's long-standing complaints about pro-Khalistan terror operating from Canadian soil. This when India has provided ample evidence through its dossiers. The question being, when it has listed the Bishnoi gang of India as a terror entity, why isn't enough being done as far as addressing the Khalistan menace is concerned? Siddhant joins me with responses to that question. Siddhant, share the details.
Well, that's right. So Manoj Gupta is perhaps highlighting in his report that this Canada's move is an attempt to shift global perception, making India appear as an exporter of organized terror. This is to undermine India's strong counter-terror diplomacy against Pakistan-sponsored jihadists. Canada is inconsistent, and we have a question why Bishnoi was banned quickly. Indian side gave multiple dossiers, as you pointed out, Akanksha, but Canada ignores India's dossiers on Khalistan outfits like SFJ and Babbar Khalsa. Also, India's dossier consists of names of the 5 of the members from the Bishnoi gang. Only sharing intelligence will prove that Canada is serious or playing optics. India has already provided evidence of Canadian soil being misused for terror funding, propaganda, and targeting killings by SFJ's Khalistan referendum events. Bishnoi is already under NIA and UAPA action, showing India doesn't need Canada's certification on who is a terrorist. Canada's act risks internationalizing criminal gangs as terror groups and weakening the global counter-terror framework. Right. Canada's move is a diversionary tactic against its domestic criticism and diaspora politics. Yeah. So definitely, this move is has to be welcome. But Akanksha, there's also a difference between a terror gang, a terror group, and a transnational gang. Perhaps that difference is something which Canadian government needs to understand.
That's a very interesting point that you have just now raised, because Siddhant, it's important for us to also highlight what the Indian government has shared so far in its dossiers. Not only have they spoken about how drug trafficking money is being used to fund terror activities against India, they have also talked about how Khalistani activities in Canada on Canadian soil are also threatening the Indian diaspora and the diplomats there.
Well, that's right, Akanksha. In fact, if we go by the developments taken place in last 6 months, then Indrajit Gosal, the chief coordinator of SFJ, he was arrested and now he's out on bail. What about the referendum, events that are being organized by the Khalistani groups? Then, the dossier which India had given to Canada long back, there were 26 names in that dossier, but no action against the gangsters like Arshdallah and others. So these are some questions which needs to be asked to the authorities in Canada. Why the selective targeting? In fact, some of the experts, Akanksha, in Canada, I have managed to speak to them after this announcement. Perhaps they are saying that it looks like that the Canadian government wants to equate the Bishnoi gang with the Khalistani groups, and also one section in the Canadian government, perhaps is first trying to put this group in the list of terror entity, and perhaps then would be going after the Indian government by linking this group to the Indian government. That could also be the plan, Akanksha. So it is also to appease the anti-India Khalistani groups. Many are looking this move, with that view as well.
It's very interesting that you talk about how this could very well be a diversionary tactic, because from the Surrey mayor to the BC premier and even the federal opposition leader Pierre Poilievre all had been demanding that the Bishnoi gang be listed as a terror entity, something that Mark Carney has now done. So the moot question now is that, is this just to also appease the opposition? And is this just a merely symbolic act, or what is the political will of the Mark Carney government to crack down on terrorism as a menace, whether that's being perpetrated by, say, Lawrence Bishnoi or, say, someone like SFJ and Panu?
Yes, that's right, Akanksha. And in fact, the question needs to be asked to the authorities in Canada that why there has not been any action against the Khalistani groups, why the political, political figures in Canada are not demanding action against the Khalistani groups. Now, the CSIS report itself says that the Khalistani groups are being funded by Canada. They are also an extended arm of ISI and many other foreign intelligence agency. But the selective targeting of Bishnoi gang perhaps is something which should not go down well with the Indian government. Now, both countries have advanced their cooperation as far as security-related matters is concerned. High commissioners have been reinstated. In fact, we could expect visit of Foreign Minister Anita Anand to India later this year. But the fact here is that that is Mark Carney trying to appease the anti-India lobby Khalistani groups in Canada, because these groups have largely been very critical of Canada reinstating High Commissioner and trying to normalize ties with India. So is it to appease them? Perhaps that is the question which needs to be asked.
Many thanks to you, Siddhant, for putting that into perspective. Let me quickly go across to Mr. KP Fabian, who's a former diplomat. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining in. If I could bring you in on how do you assess this terror listing of the Lawrence Bishnoi gang? Questions are now being raised. While this gang has now been listed as a terror entity, why hasn't the Mark Carney government shown the will to crack down on the Khalistan menace?
Well, let me put it this way. Declaring the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist organization is something to be welcomed, because in the past, and I was there in Canada at the time of the assassination of the Prime Minister, Kanishka and Blue Star and all that.
Right.
There was a reluctance on the part of the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to take action, even when we brought matters to their attention, meaning threat of violence or actual violence. So this is a good thing. And only thing is that, we have to wait for the court verdict on Niger killing that is supposed to be coming up soon, and then we will see what to do. But also take into account that the Canadian National Security Advisor has come to India recently to meet with the counterpart. So the conversation between India and Canada is going on very well.
Many thanks to you, Ambassador Fabian, for joining in with those precious insights on CNN News 18. Let's quickly go across to our guest from Canada. Currently, I'm joined in by Mr. Kash, who is the former Public Safety Minister of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Heed, for joining in on CNN News 18. Let's talk about the foreign ministers of both the countries, Dr. Jaishankar and Anita Anand, meeting on the sidelines of UNGA. They welcomed the High Commissioners to both the countries. What are your hopes for the beginning of this reset that we are witnessing ever since Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Carney met on the sidelines of G7?
Well, I think over the last 8 months, we've started to see a mending of the differences that took place between India and Canada with respect to bilateral agreements and arrangements that have been in place for over 75 years. And I think the discord that occurred, I believe, over in April of 2023, 2024, were very, very concerning with respect to ensuring we have not only diplomatic relationships with India, in that we can ensure that we are working together collectively, whether it's on trade or other economical gains between both countries. The diaspora in Canada is very close to India, as you can imagine. And we've got to make sure that we capitalize on that, we build on that, we certainly mend the differences that we've had and come together and look forward to a future working together.
So, given the federal opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, British Columbia Premier David Eby, and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith were all demanding that the federal government in Canada declares the Lawrence Bishnoi gang as a terrorist organization, do you see this listing as just a symbolic act, or is this also a result of consistent political pressure from the opposition on the Carney government? Is this also an act to pacify the opposition?
I believe it is, and it's internal pressure that's coming from some of these political leaders, again, that are really misunderstanding what are problems related to some of the South Asian extortions that are taking place, and the fact that they can point to outside of this country as those being responsible for it. For example, in Canada, we have 88 groups that are listed as terrorists, including Mexican drug cartels and all that. We have had very little success in dealing with some of the assets that they may have or properties they may have. Matter of fact, we have more illicit drugs coming into Canada from Mexico than we've ever had before. So although you can have a feel-good announcement from a political position that this is what you're doing, at the end of the day, it's not going to make much difference at the ground level when we have our South Asian community experiencing crimes against them.
So, do you see that India has played a proactive role in the security cooperation on this front with the listing happening of the Bishnoi gang as a terror entity? Do you sense any cooperation on the security aspect coming from India?
Well, I don't know what India's relationship is. Certainly, I know what has gone on internally here in Canada with respect to politicizing this, and I wouldn't be surprised if that politicization of it has carried over into some of the negotiations and relationships with India with respect to this. At the end of the day, you have an individual that's been in jail for over a decade now, and you're trying to say that he has this international persona of being a big terrorist. You just raised his profile in Canada, which is probably a paradoxical reason why we should have never gone in that direction, because now we've instilled more fear in the South Asian communities that are going to be victim of any violent activity, whether it's caused by domestic gang members or even gang members at large across the globe.
All right, so when the two NSAs of India and Canada met just days ago in New Delhi, NSA Ajit Doval and Natalie Drouin, who is the Canadian National Security Intelligence Advisor, whether it's addressing the Khalistan threat or India's security cooperation, how crucial is it at this juncture for both countries to adopt a collaborative approach to repair ties on the aspect of security and life?
Well, it is very critical that they do that, but it's how they do that is where I may have a disagreement. It has to be done for the right reasons. It cannot be done just for political reasons. So if we truly have concerns regarding the safety of both communities in India and Canada, and we can come up with a better way of dealing with it, of course, that's the way to go. But if we're just looking for political points on either side, that is not the right way to go.
All right, Mr. Heath, do you think that there has been politicization of the Khalistan issue, which is why the security threat has not been addressed so far by Canada?
Absolutely. You know, when you have the former Prime Minister of Canada going on the floor in Parliament and making those accusations without any clear evidence, you have politicized that in a disrespectful fashion, in my humble opinion.
Okay, now let's talk about the NSA meet that happened in Delhi. It came just a day after a Khalistan group had laid siege to the Indian consulate in Vancouver to protest what they were calling espionage and surveillance by Indian diplomats. They also targeted the newly arrived Indian High Commissioner to Canada, Dinesh Patnaik, on his posters. Can Mark Carney deliver on cracking down on the Khalistani menace and address India's extradition requests?
Look, we can crack down on whatever we want, but is there a political will to crack down on it? I think that's the important question. Certainly Canada has within their own sovereign rights to crack down on various things, but is there a political reason why we should or why we shouldn't? I think that is the important thing to realize, regardless of what may be the right thing to do from a human rights civil point of view.
Mr. Heed, you're the best person to tell me this today. How has this menace become, evolved over the years, especially when it comes to the Khalistan menace on Canadian soil?
It's put a lot of conspiracy theories out there. You know, I was active in law enforcement for 32 years before I was a Solicitor General here in British Columbia. And I think the conspiracy theories that are alive and well and the passionate responses from various groups, whether they're correct or they're incorrect, is certainly caused problems not only in Canada, but certainly worldwide. And we've seen this elsewhere in North America when you can see particular movements. And it's important to realize that we have our own sovereignty, our own rules, our own codes here in Canada that must be followed, whether it's human rights, civil rights, criminals. That's the way we have to ensure that that takes place. But I think if anything, it's created a lot of unnecessary criticism on both sides. And I think it's caused a lot of conspiracy theories to be put out there. And I think people pick up on those and just go in a separate direction, which does not bear well for either side, whether you're a believer in their cause or you don't believe in their cause.
My last question, Mr. Heed. We're looking at a restart of trade talks between India and Canada, given the current circumstances and the disturbances caused by Trump's tariffs. How important is it for India and Canada to not just restart these trade talks at the earliest, but also to forge stronger trade ties?
Critically important. Absolutely critically important. I think at the end of the day, the economy is going to be one of the most important things, not only in India, but in Canada. And I think if we can develop those close trade relationships where both countries can prosper because of that, better off we're going to be. But let's keep all of this, what I call noise, aside on the separatist movements. When we talk about terrorist groups of someone that's been in jail for a decade and all that, that's just noise. And we've got to make sure that that noise does not influence or interfere with some of the most important things, especially when we talk about progress and the economy with both countries.
All right, Mr. Kash, thank you so much for joining in on CNN News 18. Pleasure.